The chamber floated in the darkness of space, like a crown made of silver and light. The Galactic Council's meeting hall had stood for 3,000 years, and represented the peak of civilized society across 40 star systems. Dr. Sarah Chen walked through the massive doors with her head held high and her heart beating fast against her ribs. She had prepared for this moment for 5 years, since Earth had first made contact with the wider galaxy. The 12 council members sat on platforms that rose from the floor in a circle. Each species looked different from the last, and each brought their own strange beauty to the ancient chamber. The Varn hierarchy representative stood tallest among them. Councillor Zekthor's insect-like body gleamed with a dark shell that reflected the chamber lights. His multiple eyes tracked Sarah's every movement as she approached the center podium. Ambassador Chen of Earth, the council speaker announced in a voice that echoed through translation devices. You have requested this audience to present your species' petition for full council membership. Sarah stepped up to the podium and placed her hands on the smooth surface. The material felt warm under her fingers, and she knew that billions of beings across the galaxy were watching this moment through live feeds. Honored councilors, she began, and her voice came out steady, despite her nerves. Humanity comes before you today after 15 years as provisional observers. We have followed every protocol and respected every boundary set before us. She activated the holographic display, and images of Earth's achievements flooded the space above her head. Cities that touched the clouds, and ships that could cross star systems. Medical advances that had cured diseases thought impossible to defeat. Art and music and literature from 1,000 different cultures. We have much to offer this council, Sarah continued, and much to learn from the species gathered here. We seek only to stand as equals among you and contribute to the peace and prosperity of galactic civilization. Zekthor's mandibles clicked together in a sound that made Sarah's skin crawl. Equals? His voice came through the translator like grinding metal. Your species has existed in space for barely 2 decades, and you dare speak of equality? Sarah had expected resistance, but she kept her composure. We may be young by galactic standards, but we learn quickly. We adapt, and we innovate. Innovation! Zekthor slammed one of his limbs against his platform. You speak of innovation as if it were a virtue when it is your greatest crime. Some looked uncomfortable, while others watched with cold calculation in their alien eyes. Humanity has violated the conservation protocols, Zekthor declared, and brought up his own holographic evidence. You terraform dead worlds without permission. You spread across systems like a plague. You develop technologies without council oversight. Sarah felt anger rising in her chest, but she forced it down. We terraform uninhabited worlds. We harm no existing life. As for technology, show them, Zekthor interrupted, and his eyes gleamed with something like triumph. Sarah hesitated for only a moment. Then she made her decision and changed her presentation. New images appeared showing Earth's latest achievement. A faster-than-light drive that worked on completely different principles than council-approved technology. The chamber erupted in noise. Council members shouted in a dozen different languages, while their translation devices struggled to keep up. You have developed independent FTL technology. The Luminary representative's crystalline body pulsed with shocked light. This is forbidden for provisional species. It is forbidden because the Council wishes to maintain control, Sarah said, and let her voice carry across the chaos. You keep younger species dependent on your technology and your rules. You claim it is for our own good, but we know the truth. She had gone too far, and she knew it. But Earth had sent her here to tell the truth, no matter the cost. Zekthor stood to his full height, and his shadow fell across Sarah like a dark wing. You accuse this council of oppression? You who have existed in space for less time than some of us have held office? I accuse this council of fear, Sarah replied, and met his multiple eyes without flinching. You fear change, and you fear species that might one day surpass you. So you keep us small, and dependent, and grateful for whatever scraps of knowledge you choose to share. The silence that followed her words felt heavy enough to crush her bones. This council has maintained peace for millennia, Zekthor said, and his voice had gone quiet, in a way that terrified Sarah more than his shouting. We have prevented wars, and guided younger species away from the mistakes that could destroy them. And now you come here and spit on that legacy. He moved toward the podium with steps that clicked against the chamber floor. Sarah stood her ground, even as every instinct screamed at her to run. You represent everything dangerous about your species, Zekthor continued. You are arrogant and reckless and convinced of your own superiority. You would drag this galaxy into chaos if we allowed it. Sarah saw something shift in his stance, saw the way his limbs moved into a position she had never seen before. Training that she didn't even know she had received suddenly screamed warnings in her brain. Counselor Zekthor, the speaker called out in alarm. What are you doing? But it was already too late. Zekthor activated a device built into his own body, a neural disruptor that sent invisible waves of energy directly into Sarah's brain. She felt her neurons firing wrong, and her heart stopping, and her lungs forgetting how to breathe. She fell to her knees on the podium floor and tried to speak, but no words would come. The chamber spun around her, and she heard voices shouting, but they sounded like they came from very far away. Her last coherent thought was of Earth, of blue oceans and green forests, and the smell of rain on summer evenings. Of her parents, who had been so proud when she was chosen for this mission. Of all the people who had believed in her. Sarah Chen died on the floor of the Galactic Council chamber, while representatives from 12 species watched, some in horror and some in approval, and some with carefully neutral expressions that revealed nothing. Zekthor turned to face the council. I have eliminated a threat to galactic peace, he announced. Humanity has proven itself unworthy of membership. I call for an immediate vote to expel them from all council territories. The vote took 17 minutes. 8 species voted in favor. 3 voted against. 1 abstained. Sarah's body was still warm when the council declared humanity exiled. Her communication device lay next to her hand, still active and still transmitting. Back on Earth, her final moments had been broadcast to every screen and every device across the entire planet. 42 billion human beings watched their ambassador die, and then they watched the council vote to exile their entire species. In the United Nations Emergency Assembly Building in Geneva, 5,000 representatives from every nation on Earth sat in absolute silence as the transmission ended. Someone in the back row stood up. His voice shook when he spoke, but his words were clear. Get me Fleet Admiral Kowalski. The silence broke like a dam bursting. Within 6 hours, Earth had recalled every ship and every citizen from Council space. Within 12 hours, humanity had vanished from the galaxy like smoke and wind. The Council did not understand what they had done. 3 months passed, and the galaxy learned what human silence meant. Every human colony stood empty when Council inspection teams arrived. The buildings remained, but everything useful had been stripped away. Computers and machinery and even the power cores had been removed with surgical precision. The colony of New Horizon had housed 50,000 humans. Now it was a ghost town, where wind whistled through empty streets and doors hung open on broken hinges. Commander Vrex of the Varn military led his team through the abandoned settlement. His scanning equipment showed nothing, no radiation signatures, and no residual energy traces. Nothing that would indicate where the humans had gone, or how they had moved so much equipment so quickly. It's like they were never here, one of his officers said. Her voice came through the communicator with an edge of unease. They were here for 12 years, Vrex replied. They built farms and factories. They had families and schools. Now there is nothing. He kicked at a piece of debris and watched it skitter across the empty plaza. Somewhere in the distance, something metallic clanged in the wind. Sir, another officer called from the communications center. You need to see this. Vrex found her standing in front of the main terminal. A single message blinked on the screen in simple text. We learned from the best, it read. The Council taught us to erase ourselves when necessary. Thank you for the lesson. Back on the Council station, Zekthor reviewed reports from across the border regions. 17 trade ships had disappeared in the last month. No distress signals and no debris fields. They had simply vanished between one jump point and the next. They are running scared, he told the assembled council. Human knows they cannot stand against us, so they hide in the darkness like prey animals. But Councillor Yith of the Luminari was not convinced. Her crystalline form pulsed with troubled light as she shared her own findings. We have detected gravitational anomalies along our borders, she said, patterns that match no known natural phenomena and no recognized Council technology. Sensor glitches, Zekthor dismissed. The Luminari worry too much about shadows. These are not shadows, Yith insisted. These are deliberate distortions in space-time itself. Someone is manipulating gravity in ways we have never seen. The Depth Dweller representative spoke from his tank of liquid methane. His words came through translation as bubbles that became sound. The humans have gone silent, but they have not gone away. I fear we have made a terrible mistake. Zekthor's mandibles clacked with irritation. History will vindicate our decision. That same day, a message buoy was discovered, drifting near the Proxima Gate. It bore human markings and a simple data packet. Inside were coordinates and a timestamp. 7 days from now. Nothing else. The council debated for 3 days about whether to investigate. Half argued it was obviously a trap, while the other half insisted they needed to understand what humanity was planning. In the end, they sent a fleet. 47 ships from 6 different species, heavily armed and shielded and ready for anything. Or so they believed. Admiral Kowalski watched the Council fleet approach through sensors that existed in dimensions the Council did not know about. Earth's new technology had advanced far beyond what Sarah Chen had revealed in that final presentation. They're curious, his tactical officer observed, but also cautious. They should be terrified, Kowalski replied. The Council fleet arrived at the coordinates precisely on schedule. What they found made even the most experienced commanders feel cold fear in whatever organs served them for hearts. A perfect sphere hung in space, 5,000 kilometers in diameter, made entirely of wreckage. Every ship that had disappeared over the last 3 months was here, arranged with mathematical precision around a neutron star, their hulls stripped of weapons and drives, but otherwise intact. In the exact center of the sphere, a holographic projector floated, powered by something the Council scanners could not identify. The hologram activated as the fleet approached. Sarah Chen appeared life-sized and perfect, her image sharp enough to see the intelligence in her eyes and the determination in her stance. She stood at the Council podium again, her hands on the smooth surface, her voice clear and strong. Honored counselors, the recording began. You wanted to see what humans do with dangerous technology. You feared our innovations and our refusal to follow your rules. The hologram Sarah smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Now you will learn what we do when you take one of our own. Every ship in this sphere was captured without loss of life. We are not murderers like some council members. The crews were returned to their home worlds in escape pods with enough supplies to survive. She gestured at the sphere around her. This is a message written in mathematics, in physics, in the cold calculations of force and velocity. You killed one human diplomat who came in peace. We have disabled 100 ships for every year she served Earth. The image flickered, and Sarah's expression hardened. Dr. Sarah Chen gave 15 years of her life to building bridges between humanity and the Council. 1,500 ships now float here, as payment for those years. Consider this a down payment on the debt you owe. The hologram Sarah leaned forward, and her eyes seemed to look directly at every commander in the Council fleet. You wanted to teach us our place, wanted to show us that young species must know their role. Message received and understood. She straightened and clasped her hands behind her back. Now let us teach you something. Let us show you what happens when you mistake patience for weakness, when you confuse diplomacy for surrender, when you think that being civilized means being harmless. The hologram began to fade, but her final words echoed across every Council ship's communication system. We are coming. Not with words this time. Not with petitions or requests or appeals to your better nature. We are coming with the one language you seem to understand. The image disappeared and was replaced by a star chart. Council territory marked in blue, and human space marked in red. A line drew itself from Earth toward the Council's heart, and numbers scrolled alongside it. Force calculations, trajectory plots, estimated casualties if the Council chose to fight. The mathematics was beautiful and terrible and absolutely certain. Commander Thal of the Death Dweller contingent stared at the projections and felt his breathing apparatus struggle to keep up with his racing hearts. These numbers, he whispered, these are not threats. These are promises. Impossible, his tactical officer replied, but her voice shook. No species has this much military power. The calculations must be wrong. The calculations are human, Thal said. They do not make mistakes with numbers. The Council fleet sat in the shadow of the wreckage sphere for 6 hours, while commanders transmitted urgent reports back to their governments. Some advocated for immediate military response, while others called for negotiation. A few suggested surrender. Zekthor received all their reports and dismissed every word. They are bluffing, he declared. Humanity is young and weak. They have destroyed some trade ships and made threats. We will crush them. He ordered the Grand Armada to assemble. Every Council species would contribute ships. They would gather the largest military force in galactic history and show humanity what real power looked like. 10,000 ships began the slow process of mobilization. On Earth, Fleet Admiral Kowalski allowed himself a thin smile. They took the bait, he said. Should we be happy about that? His second-in-command asked. Kowalski looked at the picture on his desk. Sarah Chen shaking hands with him at her graduation from the diplomatic corps. She had been so young and so idealistic and so certain that peace was possible. No, he said quietly. We should not be happy, but we will be thorough. He activated the fleet-wide communication system. All ships, this is Kowalski. Begin Phase 2. Show them what Sarah Chen died trying to prevent. Across human space, 92,000 ships began to move. The Grand Armada assembled at the Proxima Gate like a forest of steel and energy. 10,347 ships from 8 different species. The largest military force the Council had deployed in 5 centuries. Commander Salkith of the Luminari 4th Fleet watched the formations take shape and felt uneasy, despite the overwhelming show of force. Something about this situation felt wrong, in ways she could not articulate. The Council war doctrine was elegant and time-tested. Shields would absorb incoming fire, while energy weapons would gradually wear down enemy defenses. Battles lasted days or weeks, and casualties were minimized through adherence to the civilized combat accords. Every spacefaring species had signed those accords 200 years ago. Warfare had become almost ritualized, almost safe. Have the humans signed the accords? Sulketh asked her tactical officer. The officer checked his database, and his crystalline structure dimmed with concern. Negative. Earth never ratified them. They were provisional observers at the time, and not eligible. Salketh felt cold light pulse through her core. So they are not bound by the rules. Technically no, but surely they would follow basic civilized principles. The sensor alarm cut him off mid-sentence. "Contact!" the weapons officer shouted, multiple signatures dropping out of FTL. The human fleet appeared on their scopes. 83 ships arranged in a loose formation that made no tactical sense by Council standards. They were too spread out, and their shields were barely powered. 83 vessels, Zekthor's voice came through the fleet-wide channel, and he sounded triumphant. They send 83 ships against our thousands. This will be over quickly. Salketh was not so certain. Those formations are wrong. They are not preparing for a conventional engagement. Because they cannot win a conventional engagement, Zekthor replied. All ships, advance and engage. Target their drives first. We will capture what we can and destroy the rest. The Grand Armada moved forward in the precise formations they had drilled for years, shields linked and overlapping to create walls of protective energy, weapons charged, and targeting systems locked onto the human vessels. The human ships did not return fire. They turned and accelerated away at speeds that made Salketh's instruments scream impossible readings. "They are running," Zekthor crowed. "Pursue them." "Wait," Salketh tried to warn, but her voice was lost in the chaos of 1,200 commanders, all shouting orders at once. The human ships led them on for 17 minutes, staying just out of weapons range. Their engines burning with power signatures that defied everything the Council knew about propulsion systems. Then they scattered. "They are breaking formation," Salketh's tactical officer reported, "spreading across a three-dimensional sphere with our fleet at the center." "Surrounding us with 83 ships?" Zekthor laughed. "Let them try." That was when the human ships launched their weapons. Salketh saw them on her sensors as tiny signatures moving at impossible velocities. Objects no larger than a personal transport accelerating to 90% of light speed. "Missiles?" her weapons officer said uncertainly. "But they are too small to carry warheads that could penetrate our shields." The first kinetic kill vehicle struck a Varn heavy cruiser at 0.92 light speed. The ship's shields meant nothing. Energy barriers designed to deflect particle beams and plasma bolts did not even register the presence of solid matter moving at relativistic speeds. The projectile hit the cruiser's starboard side, and the laws of physics took over. Mass times velocity equals force, and at near light speeds, even a small mass carries the energy of a nuclear detonation. The Varn cruiser did not explode. It simply ceased to exist, converted to expanding plasma and shrapnel in a fraction of a second. "Shields to maximum," Salketh screamed, but she knew it would not matter. The kinetic kill vehicles tore through the Grand Armada like bullets through paper. Ships that had been built to withstand hours of sustained energy weapon fire lasted less than a heartbeat against solid objects moving at relativistic speeds. Captains tried to evade, but nothing that large could dodge projectiles moving that fast. Point defense systems tried to intercept, but the KKVs were too small and too fast, and there were too many of them. In 12 minutes, the Grand Armada lost 800 ships. "Retreat," Zekthor finally ordered. "All ships fall back to the gate." But the human fleet had positioned themselves perfectly, blocking the escape routes with their own ships and continuing to launch those terrible kinetic weapons from beyond Council weapons range. Salketh made a decision that probably saved her fleet. "All Luminary vessels, emergency jump, scatter protocol, do not wait for Council authorization." Her ships vanished into FTL one by one. Several other Council species followed her example, jumping to random coordinates just to escape the killing field. When the battle ended, 3 hours after it began, the Grand Armada had been reduced to less than 3,000 ships, 7,000 council vessels destroyed or disabled, drifting in space, with their crews either dead or abandoning ship in life pods. The human fleet suffered 0 casualties. Zekthor sat in his command chair on the bridge of his flagship, surrounded by damage reports and casualty lists, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. A transmission came through, human origin. He almost refused it, but his communications officer activated it before he could object. Fleet Admiral Kowalski appeared on the screen, an older human with gray hair and cold eyes. "Counselor Zekthor," he said in heavily accented but understandable Galactic Common, "I wanted you to understand something before this war continues." Zekthor said nothing, his mandibles frozen in shock. "You have been fighting by rules for so long that you forgot why those rules exist," Kowalski continued. "The civilized combat accords were not created to make wars safer. They were created to make it survivable." The Admiral gestured at something off-screen, and new images appeared. Schematics and weapons designs that made Zekthor's blood run cold. "Humanity never signed your accords. We spent 15 years studying your technology and your tactics and your comfortable assumptions about how civilized species wage war." Kowalski leaned forward. "Did you know that my species has been at war with itself for our entire recorded history? We have fought with rocks and spears, with swords and arrows, with guns and tanks and aircraft, with nuclear weapons that could burn continents." He pulled up historical images from Earth, cities in ruins, battlefields covered in bodies, mushroom clouds rising over devastation. "We have killed each other in numbers that would horrify you. We have developed 10,000 ways to destroy our enemies, and then we developed 10,000 more." The images shifted to show the current human fleet. Ships designed with lessons learned from millennia of total warfare. You killed Dr. Sarah Chen because she scared you, because she represented a species that might challenge your control. You were right to be scared, but you chose the wrong response. Kowalski's expression hardened. "If you had accepted us, we would have become your allies. We would have learned your ways and adapted to your culture." Sarah Chen believed in that possibility with all her heart. He paused, and when he spoke again his voice carried the weight of grief and rage combined. "But you murdered her in front of the galaxy. You voted to exile us. You taught us that the Council respects only force." The transmission showed a counter ticking upward, ships disabled, lives disrupted, the mathematical price of the Council's decision. "For every human you killed, we will disable 100 of your ships. Dr. Chen was one human. We have disabled 8,000 ships so far. That leaves 92,000 ships to balance the equation." Zekthor finally found his voice. "You cannot sustain this. You do not have the resources. The numbers." "The numbers are exactly correct," Kowalski interrupted. "We have 92,000 ships ready to deploy. We have weapons you have never imagined. We have been preparing for this scenario since before we made first contact with you." He stood up and the camera pulled back to show the bridge of his ship, humans working with calm efficiency at their stations. "We did not want this war. We wanted peace. We wanted friendship. We wanted to join your council as equals and contribute to galactic civilization." His voice dropped to something quiet and deadly. "You killed that dream when you killed Sarah Chen. Now you will pay the price. Every ship, every station, every military installation you have will be dismantled until you agree to negotiate." Zekthor tried to speak, but Kowalski raised a hand. "We are not savages. We do not kill civilians. We do not destroy inhabited worlds. But we will dismantle your military power, piece by piece, until you understand that humanity will not be dismissed." The transmission showed one final image. Sarah Chen, standing at the council podium, alive and brilliant and passionate about peace. "She deserved better than you gave her," Kowalski said, "and so do we." The transmission ended. Zekthor sat in silence, while around him his crew tried desperately to salvage what remained of the once mighty Grand Armada. Across Council space, emergency sessions were called. Species that had voted for war now reconsidered. Some called for immediate negotiation, while others demanded escalation. The galaxy was learning what humans had known for thousands of years. There are no winners in total war, only survivors. The council chamber that had stood unified for 3,000 years now echoed with arguments and accusations. Species that had voted together for centuries now blamed each other for the catastrophe. Councillor Ith of the Luminari stood with her crystalline form pulsing angry red light. "We warned you," she said, and her voice cut through the chaos. "We told you that humanity was dangerous, and that executing their ambassador would lead to war." "You voted in favor of the expulsion," Zekthor shot back, his mandibles clicking with agitation. "Because you gave us no choice." Ith flared brighter. "You executed her before any of us could object. You forced us to either support your decision or admit that the Council has no control." The Depth Dweller representative spoke from his methane tank. "My government is withdrawing our fleets. We will not send our children to die for Zekthor's pride." 3 other species announced similar decisions within the hour. The Council that had commanded 8 species military forces now controlled only 4. Zekthor watched his coalition crumble and felt something like panic for the first time in his long life. "You are cowards," he hissed. "All of you. Humanity is testing us, and you flee at the first setback." "First setback?" Councillor Grath of the Stonebearers laughed, a sound like grinding rocks. "We lost 7,000 ships in one battle. That is not a setback. That is a massacre." But Zekthor refused to accept defeat. He had spent 2 centuries building his power within the Council, and he would not let one primitive species destroy everything. He gathered the species still loyal to him and presented a new plan. "We strike at their homeworld," he announced. "Earth is the heart of their power. Without it, they will collapse." "Earth's location is heavily fortified," one of his remaining allies objected. "Intelligence suggests they have turned their entire solar system into a defensive network." "Intelligence from humans is worthless," Zekthor dismissed. "They are psychological warriors. They want us to fear their defenses. In reality, they are stretched thin. Most of their fleet is deployed attacking our territory." It was a lie, and Zekthor knew it. But he needed this victory, needed to prove that the Council could still dominate. He assembled what remained of the Varn hierarchy's elite fleet. 2,500 ships crewed by his best warriors, veterans of 100 minor conflicts who had never known defeat. They entered human space through an unguarded jump point, or at least what appeared to be unguarded. No human ships challenged them as they began the long journey toward Earth's sun. "See," Zekthor told his commanders, "they are not as prepared as they claimed." Admiral Kowalski watched the Varn fleet approach through sensors scattered across the outer solar system. Millions of tiny probes disguised as asteroids and ice chunks, all feeding data back to Earth Command. "They are heading straight for us," his tactical officer reported. 2,500 ships, all Varn hierarchy. They will reach Neptune's orbit in 6 hours. "Let them come," Kowalski replied. "It is time to show them what defending our home really means." The human species had spent 15 years preparing for this possibility, preparing for the day when their peaceful overtures were rejected and they had to fight. Earth's solar system had been turned into a weapon. The Varn fleet crossed Neptune's orbit, and suddenly their sensors exploded with targets. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. What they had thought was a simple ice giant was actually the center of a vast defensive network. Neptune's moons had been hollowed out and filled with mass drivers, each one capable of launching projectiles at relativistic speeds. The Kuiper Belt objects surrounding the gas giant were not natural debris. They were autonomous defense platforms, each armed with missiles and point defense lasers, and AI systems that had been specifically designed to kill ships. "Evasive maneuvers," Zekthor screamed, but it was far too late. The Battle of Neptune lasted 4 hours, and it was not really a battle, it was an execution. Mass drivers on Triton launched tungsten rods the size of small buildings. Accelerated to .8 light speed, they tore through Varn's shields like they did not exist. Autonomous drones swarmed from hidden bases on frozen moons. Thousands of small craft that moved with precision no biological pilot could match. They targeted engines and weapon systems with surgical accuracy. And from Earth itself came the Retribution-class dreadnoughts, humanity's answer to Council capital ships, vessels 3 kilometers long and built with technology that married Council principles with human innovation. The Retribution-class ships did not bother with energy weapons or missiles. They mounted mass drivers that could punch through shields with pure kinetic force, and they moved with an agility that should have been impossible for something so large. Zekthor's flagship, the Pride of the Hive, found itself surrounded by 3 Retribution-class vessels and 100 autonomous drones. His weapons were useless against their armor, and his shields buckled under their assault. "We surrender," his communications officer screamed into the void. "We surrender." The human ship stopped firing. A transmission came through. A human face appeared on the screen, younger than Kowalski, a woman with scars on her face and anger in her eyes. "This is Captain Martinez of the Retribution, Counselor Zekthor. You are hereby ordered to power down all weapons and prepare to be boarded." Zekthor felt shame burn through him like acid. "You would take prisoners?" he asked. "We are not you," Martinez replied coldly. "We do not execute unarmed representatives. Now power down or we will disable your ship manually." The Varn fleet, what remained of it, surrendered within the hour. Of the 2,500 ships that had entered human space, only 83 were still capable of flight. The rest drifted as wreckage or limped toward designated surrender coordinates. Zekthor was brought aboard the Retribution in restraints. Martinez met him in the docking bay with a full security detail. "Why are we not dead?" Zekthor asked, genuinely confused. "Because we are better than you. And because we need you alive." She led him to a conference room where Admiral Kowalski waited with several other high-ranking humans and a collection of data storage devices. "Sit down, Counselor," Kowalski ordered, and Zekthor found himself obeying. The Admiral activated a holographic display. "We recovered these from your flagship secure database. Very interesting reading." The documents appeared in the air, communications between Zekthor and other Council members, plans that had been made years before first contact with humanity, strategies to prevent any emerging species from gaining real power. "You knew about us before we reached the Council," Kowalski said. "Your intelligence services detected our FTL experiments 5 years before official contact." More documents appeared, analysis of human technological progress, predictions about humanity's potential, recommendations about how to suppress it. "You orchestrated the entire thing," one of Kowalski's advisors said, her voice thick with disgust. "You planned Dr. Chen's execution months in advance. You needed a crisis to justify expelling us, before we became too powerful to control." Zekthor said nothing, his mandibles locked tight. "But here is the really interesting part," Kowalski continued, and pulled up older files, documents going back decades, centuries even. "The Council has been doing this for 1,000 years. Every species that shows promise gets suppressed. Some are expelled, some are destroyed, some are simply kept in provisional status forever, while the Council elite maintains control." The humans in the room looked at Zekthor with something beyond anger, with a cold clarity that frightened him more than rage ever could. "Dr. Chen suspected," Kowalski said quietly. "She sent back reports about inconsistencies in Council records, about species that should have advanced, but mysteriously stagnated. She was building a case to expose the whole system. He leaned forward. That is why you killed her. Not because she threatened the council, because she threatened you. What will you do with this information? Zekthor finally asked. Martinez smiled without any warmth. We are going to broadcast it. Every document, every communication, every piece of evidence that proves the council has been lying to the galaxy for centuries. And then, we are going to put you on trial, Kowalski added. A public trial where every species will watch you answer for your crimes. The transmission went out 6 hours later, to every civilized world, every colony, every station and outpost. Within days, 4 more council species declared independence. Protests erupted on 100 worlds as citizens demanded answers from their governments. The old council structure began to collapse under the weight of revealed lies and broken trust. Zekthor was sentenced to live the remainder of his life in a simulation, trapped in Sarah Chen's final moments, experiencing her death over and over, feeling what she felt as her neurons fired wrong and her heart stopped. Some said it was too harsh a punishment, others said it was not harsh enough. But everyone agreed it was more mercy than he had shown her. Admiral Kowalski sat in his office and watched the news feeds showing council worlds in chaos. Species that had been allies for centuries now turning on each other. His communication system chimed. An incoming transmission from the remnants of the council leadership. Admiral Kowalski, the message began. The council requests negotiations for a ceasefire. Kowalski looked at Sarah Chen's picture on his desk and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Then, he sent his response. Humanity accepts your request, prepared to discuss terms, and understand that we will not settle for anything less than complete reform. The galaxy was changing, and it had all started because they killed one human. 6 months after the war began, the galaxy looked very different than it had before. The council chambers had been rebuilt after riots on the station required emergency repairs. The new design included seats for 40 species instead of 12. And the platforms no longer rose high above the floor. Everyone sat at the same level. Admiral Kowalski walked through those doors in a civilian suit, his military rank temporarily set aside for this diplomatic mission. Beside him walked representatives from 20 species that had broken free from council control during the conflict. The remaining council leadership waited at a large circular table. 8 species who had once ruled the galaxy now looked tired and defeated. Councillor Yith of the Luminari served as the primary negotiator, Zekthor's faction having been dissolved entirely. Admiral Kowalski, Yith greeted him, her crystalline form pulsing with subdued blue light. We have much to discuss. We do, Kowalski agreed and took his seat. Humanity did not want this war. But now that it has happened, we intend to ensure it never happens again. The negotiations lasted for 17 days. Humanity's demands were simple but revolutionary. They did not want territory or resources or reparations measured in currency. They wanted change. The document that emerged became known as the Chen Accords, named for the woman whose death had sparked the transformation of galactic civilization. The first provision abolished the classification of species as provisional or full members. Any species capable of faster-than-light travel would be granted immediate full representation in the new council. The second provision established technology sharing programs. The old guard species could no longer hoard knowledge to maintain control. All advances would be distributed freely among member species. The third provision created an independent judiciary system. No longer could council members execute representatives or make unilateral decisions about other species' fates. Every action would be subject to review by courts that included judges from multiple species. The fourth provision was the most controversial. Humanity would establish and oversee a peacekeeping force. Ships and personnel from Earth would monitor council space and ensure compliance with the new rules. You ask us to accept human military presence throughout the galaxy? One of the old council members objected. How is that different from the control we exercised? Kowalski met their eyes without flinching. Because we will enforce rules that apply equally to everyone, including ourselves. If humanity violates the Accords, we will face the same justice as any other species. And who will enforce rules against the enforcers? Another counselor asked. You will, Kowalski replied. The peacekeeping force will report to the full council, not to Earth. We provide the ships and the training, but the council provides the oversight. It was not a perfect system, but it was better than what had existed before. The Chen Accords were signed on a date that would become a galactic holiday, the anniversary of change. Every species marked it in their own way, but all remembered the human who had died to make it possible. The 4 species that had actively supported Zekthor's faction faced special terms. They were placed under supervised development, required to prove they could function within the new system before regaining full autonomy. The irony was not lost on anyone. These species had once forced similar restrictions on younger civilizations. Now they experienced it themselves. But humanity proved to be far more merciful than the old council had been. Supervised development meant assistance and education, not suppression. Human advisors worked alongside the restricted species to help them adapt. A monument was erected in the new council chambers, 3 meters tall and carved from a single piece of earth marble. It showed Dr. Sarah Chen standing at a podium, one hand raised in greeting, her expression hopeful and determined. The inscription read, "She came in peace, we came in war. May the galaxy never forget the cost of both." Every session of the new council began with a moment of silence before her statue. Kowalski retired from military service 6 months after the Accords were signed. He had spent 3 decades in uniform, and he was tired. His final duty was delivering Sarah Chen's personal effects to her parents. They lived in a small house in Shanghai, surrounded by gardens that Sarah's mother tended with careful devotion. Kowalski stood at their door, holding a simple box that contained everything Sarah had owned when she died. Her father answered the door, an older man with gray hair and eyes that had cried too many tears. "Admiral Kowalski," he said quietly, "please come in." They sat in a living room filled with pictures of Sarah. Sarah as a child, Sarah graduating university, Sarah shaking hands with world leaders as she prepared for her mission. She was so proud to represent Earth, her mother said, her voice barely above a whisper. She believed in peace, believed that humans and aliens could work together. Kowalski opened the box with gentle hands. Inside was Sarah's journal, her personal communication device, a few small mementos from her time on the council station. "She was right," he said. "The galaxy is working together now because of her, because of what she tried to do." Sarah's father took the journal and opened it to the last entry, written the night before her final presentation to the council. "I know tomorrow will be difficult," Sarah had written in neat handwriting. "I know some council members will react badly to what I have to say, but I have to try. I have to believe that truth and reason can win." The entry continued down the page. Hopes and fears mixed together in Sarah's characteristic honesty. "If I don't come home," the final paragraph read, "tell them not to seek revenge. Tell them to seek justice. There is a difference. Revenge is about anger. Justice is about making things right. I want my life to mean something. I want it to lead to change, not just to more death." Her parents were crying. Kowalski felt his own eyes burn with unshed tears. "We sought justice," he told them. "We changed the system that killed her. We made sure no other species would face what she faced." "Did it require so much war?" her mother asked. Kowalski had no easy answer. "I wish it hadn't, but the council only understood force. They had to be shown that their way was no longer acceptable. He stood to leave, but Sarah's father stopped him. "Admiral, one question. Do you think she would have approved of what humanity did?" Kowalski thought about that for a long moment. "No," he finally admitted. "Sarah would have wanted a different path. She would have found a way to change things without violence. She was better than we were." He looked at her picture on the wall, young and brilliant and full of hope. "But Sarah is gone, and the people who remained had to make choices she never wanted us to face. We did the best we could with the world we were given." 2 years after the war ended, the new council was functioning with surprising effectiveness. 43 species now held seats, including several that had been suppressed for generations under the old system. Human peacekeepers patrolled disputed borders and mediated conflicts, their ships marked with the symbol of the Chen Accords, a handshake between different species. Technology sharing programs had accelerated development across the galaxy. Species that had languished for centuries now made rapid advances. The Varn hierarchy slowly rebuilt under new leadership. Zekthor's name became synonymous with tyranny, and his supporters were either in prison or exile. Young Varn studied human philosophy and history, trying to understand the species that had defeated them. Many came to admire Earth's persistence and adaptability. One young Varn, named Krixtal, came to Earth as an exchange student. She studied political science and war theory, and spent hours at the Chen Memorial Library reading Sarah's published works. "Why did your species fight so hard for one individual?" she asked her human professor during an office-hour visit. The professor, an older woman who had served in the war, considered the question carefully. "Because she wasn't just one individual," she explained. "Sarah Chen represented everything humanity values. She was intelligent and compassionate. She believed in peace and worked tirelessly to achieve it." The professor pulled up images of the battles, the wreckage, the tremendous cost in ships and resources. "When the council killed her, they killed our faith in peaceful solutions. They showed us that they did not respect our values or our people." She looked at Krixtal with serious eyes. "Humans have a saying, we never leave our own behind. It means that when you harm one of us, you harm all of us. It means that we protect each other no matter the cost." "Even if it means war?" Krixtal asked. "Especially then," the professor replied, "because if we will not stand up for our own people, how can we claim to stand for anything?" Krixtal wrote her thesis on that conversation. It became required reading in the new Council Diplomatic Academy. The galaxy learned what Sarah Chen had always known, that humanity's greatest strength was not their weapons or their technology. It was their absolute refusal to abandon each other. 5 years after the Chen Accords were signed, Earth hosted the first Galactic Peace Conference. Representatives from all Council species gathered in Geneva, the same building where the order to mobilize the fleet had been given. The conference lasted 3 weeks and produced new frameworks for cooperation, for dispute resolution, for shared scientific research. On the final day, delegates gathered at the Chen Memorial, a park built on the site where Sarah had grown up. The memorial featured a reflecting pool surrounded by plants from 40 different worlds. Each species had contributed something to create a garden that belonged to everyone. Admiral Kowalski, now an old man, attended the ceremony with Sarah's parents. They watched as young beings from across the galaxy played together in the park. Children who would grow up in a galaxy transformed by Sarah's sacrifice. "Do you think she knows?" Sarah's mother asked quietly. "Wherever she is, do you think she knows what her life created?" Kowalski looked at the happy children, at the peaceful delegates, at the garden growing with life from across the stars. "I think she would be proud," he said, "not of the war, but of what came after, the peace we built, the justice we achieved." A young human child approached them, no more than 6 years old. She had been studying the memorial plaque in the way children do when they are learning to read. "Excuse me," she said politely. "Who was Sarah Chen?" Kowalski knelt down to the child's level, his old knees protesting. She was someone very brave, he told her. She went to talk with aliens when most humans were still afraid of them. She tried to make peace. Did she succeed? The child asked. Kowalski looked around at the park, at the galaxy that had changed because one woman dared to speak truth to power. Yes, he said, she did. It just took longer than she hoped. The child nodded seriously, and then ran off to play with a young luminary, whose crystalline body sparkled in the sunlight. Sarah's father put his hand on Kowalski's shoulder. Thank you, for remembering her, for making sure she mattered. She always mattered, Kowalski replied. Some people change the world by how they live. Sarah Chen changed it, by how she died. And then, we changed it, by how we honored her. The sun set over Earth, painting the sky in colors that humans had loved for thousands of years. And in the new council chambers, billions of kilometers away, delegates from across the galaxy began another session by standing before Sarah Chen's statue. One moment of silence, for the woman who taught the galaxy that peace was worth dying for, and that justice was worth fighting for. The galaxy remembered, and it would never forget.